welcome to the weekly show of What is School For? My name is I'm the CEO of Classroom Without Walls and the host of this weekly live streaming show. This show is called What is School For? So on this show, I interview leading education professionals, parents, and students. We come here, we discuss, debate, and disrupt education. Today, I'm really excited to have another fellow disruptor in the education space to share with me about his journey to disrupt language education and what are some of the other implications that we can apply to not only language education but education in general, and what are some essential life skills that our children need to develop and master in order to be future ready. And I just learned that my guest of honor also has a book coming out next month. So really excited, a new paradigm in education. So we're also going to talk more about that book to discuss what is this new paradigm that I'm curious to learn more about. So my guest of honor, Anesh, Daya, and is the CEO and the president of On the Spot Language. I love the name. I want to learn more about that name. So he has been in education, disrupting education for 2 decades. So I'm really excited to kick off my live streaming show again after a 3-month maternity leave with another amazing disruptor, especially in the education space. So we are live on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Amazon Live. If you want to join us on Amazon Live, just enter and Classroom Without Walls .live. So you can join us live on Amazon Live, and we're also live on other social media channels. So without any further ado, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, thank you so much, Daya, ni hao. Nice to finally meet you, connect with you, and thank you so much for this amazing opportunity to share my story journey as an edupreneur, as a father, and as a passionate educator. And you are so inspiring, for leaving your job 2 years ago, doing all that you've done in the last 2 years to really say, you know what, the education system, something needs to change here. And then you've gone on this amazing mission to bring in all of these amazing people from all over the world and really share this newfound, what is a classroom actually? Like, not war, what is it good for? No, school, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing, I don't know. But the idea that we want to change what is the meaning of the classroom and disrupt education, this is just very exciting. So thank you for having me.
Of course, the honor is all mine. So I already see some of our friends. Phil, thank you for joining us live. So great to see you again. And Rob, thank you for joining us live. We'll also have people joining us live on Facebook. So do let me know in the comment section where you guys are joining us live from. US, I'm based in the US, and Anesh is based in Canada. So let us know in the comment section where you guys are joining us live from. So to kick off today's conversation, and when I was introducing you, Anesh, you are a disruptor. So I want to ask you, what does disruptor mean to you, and what inspired you to become a disruptor?
Well, it's an interesting question because I've only recently been not labeled or called a disruptor ever since I started the Disruptive Education Conference with my fellow colleague Judy Thompson in 2018 and 2019. But prior to that, I never really thought of myself as a real disruptor. I was just kind of in my own world and own bubble. But I guess no disruption would be needed if everything was just working out. If everything was fine, we wouldn't need disruption, right? But it's clear that disruption is needed. And the standard way of learning needs to be changed. And so this is where I'm at. And I feel that the word disruptor is kind of getting away from the traditional way of doing things, and not just talking about making change, but actually taking action.
That's right. That's right.
You
That's
know,
right. Yeah.
we can talk about all the things we want and we also change, but no, what are you doing to make that change?
That's
And the
right.
last 12 years of starting on the spot language, I've just been kind of following my own, passion, vision, core values, and kind of, they say the turtle wins the race slowly but surely.
That's right. That's
You got to
right.
stay steady and consistent. And so, I really wasn't inspired to become a disruptor, but I've realized that there are people like yourself and others out there who want change, who see change is possible. And, we have to do things differently. And so for me, the biggest thing was wanting to see the transfer of learning and have an outcomes based program. You know, students can learn all they want in the classroom, but unless it's actually applicable and can be used outside in the real world, then what are we doing?
That's, I mean, like 100%. My biggest lesson learned from reflecting on my own journey was that, I spent 6 years, like four years getting my PhD, 2 years getting my master degree, learning about social media and digital marketing. I was even teaching that. But when I was actually applying, I was like, wow, it is totally, totally different. So I so agree with you. And I want to go back to this point of being a disruptor. First of all, I want to ask everyone in the live audience, what does being a disruptor mean to you? Because for those of you who have been following me, I'm designing a journal, not a journal, a planner for everyone to use, especially students at Classroom Without Walls. And on the planner, there's a big word, disruptor. So I'm curious, for everyone joining us live, what does being a disruptor mean to you? And I want to go back to what you were talking about, Anish, earlier. Like, what is it about education that you are trying to disrupt? What is exactly the specific old practices that you are disrupting? And you can talk about, I know your zone of genius is in language education.
Yeah, I think my role as a language educator, or I'm educating people how to thrive in the real world, and have, real emotional and communicative skills that are, like you always say, that are applicable. What can we use? And I've heard frustration from many of my, peers and colleagues in the ESL industry that, it's very difficult for them to integrate what they're teaching in the classroom in the real world. Hence, my entire program, every day we meet our students at a different location in the city. And each location is a specific location that's actually focused around a historical point of the city. And there's learning to be had there. But they don't learn about that location from me.
Yeah.
They have to use their language and communication skills to talk to strangers to get the information. So
Wow.
who's their new
So you
teacher?
really push them outside their comfort zone.
We want students to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, And so we teach them the basic language skills. For example, let's say we meet at there's this huge library in Toronto at University of Toronto called Robarts Library. And I'll talk about a little bit quickly about, in day one, we'll teach them sentences like, where would I find Robarts Library? Is it around here? Is this building named after anyone or anything? So they're at the university and they're asking university students about their own campus library. Do you think those University of Toronto students even know the answer? They don't.
That's right.
So then they have a follow-up question or sentence we've taught them. Oh, you don't know? Oh, would you be able to look it up online for me?
Yeah.
And so the student is now like, oh, okay, it's named after. So indirectly, our students are teaching Canadians or the university students about their own university.
That's right,
You know what I
that's
mean?
right. Yeah, yeah.
So now the student is now the teacher.
That's right. That's right.
And so then they end up learning, oh, it's named after John P. Robarts. Oh, who exactly was he? Oh, he was Premier of Ontario. Oh, what do you mean by Premier? Oh, it means leader of the province. Oh, so kind of like we have three levels of government, federal, provincial. So they end up getting into, so one little location leads to so many things. And so, when I think about disrupting and how we learn, we learn through motion. We learn when we're in movement, which is why online learning can be so challenging sometimes.
That's right.
Because we need oxygen to go to the brain.
Yeah.
And if we're not physically moving, we're kind of, we're falling asleep.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I so agree, and I want to share some comments here. So first off, this is a really good comment from Michael, and he was talking. First of all, thank you for joining us live. And so like we need to be careful. Like disruption is going to become a buzzword, and I agree. Just like become so overused, and the question is, do we have a set of ideas that make people think in different ways about education and how it happens in the modern world? I love this question. Like for me, when I run Classroom Without Walls, I really want to disrupt this notion that you only go to a classroom to learn. Like on my mug here, my tagline is, the best education happens outside the classroom. So that is a belief I want to disrupt. So I want to ask you, Anish, what is a specific belief, you kind of already mentioned a little bit, that you want to disrupt when it comes to language learning? Like a set of ideas.
For me, I don't know if it's a set of ideas, but it's something that, Michael briefly touched on, and I've spoken to Michael there about is, what are real life skills that we need? Whether it be communicative, or how do we relate to someone in a real life situation, and the idea that we are humans, we learn by doing, right? And I appreciate you asking this, because when I think about my beliefs and my ideas, it all stems from when I was 21 years old, and I'm on a plane going to Taiwan. And I don't know about the culture, the language, the people, nothing. So I get on the plane, and suddenly I realize, wait, what am I doing? Where am I going? Oh my goodness. So I turned to the person next to me and said, excuse me, can you teach me the numbers 1 to 10 in Mandarin? He's like, he could see I'm sweating and I'm dripping. I'm like, I'm nervous. He could see. It's like, yeah, sure. He's like, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. I'm like, okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6. And suddenly I'm practicing. I'm in line in the washroom, and I'm practicing with people, waiting in line to go to the washroom in the airport. I'm practicing with the flight attendant. I arrive in Taiwan, practicing 13 hours, 12 hours flight, 12-hour flight. I land in the airport, and somebody turns to me, said, 你是哪里来的? Or 你是哪一国人? I'm like, huh? 你是哪里来的? I'm like, I only knew my numbers 1 to 10. But it was that moment that I realized that I need to learn language that is functional and useful for me. So what did I do? Every day after that, I learned 2 useful sentences that I needed to survive in Taiwan. Like, oh, 我的肚子饿, well, 饿死了, I'm starving. Or if I go to McDonald's and I want to order 2 cheeseburgers, 我要2个起司汉堡, 还有我不要小黄瓜, 还有1个可乐不要冰块. Could I get 2 cheeseburgers, no pickles, and a Coke, no ice? Going to McDonald's every day is not very good, but the fact that I learned the language through a communicative approach, in learning sentences that I needed to survive, then 6 months later, I could have longer and more useful conversations and connect to the culture and people, to the point I ended up getting on several TV shows.
What? Wow. So
And
at this point, you hasn't even like learned like how most people learn language, right? Like grammar, like you start with the wow, that is very disruptive. Yeah.
the thing is, my whole journey has been through my own lived experience. And so there was a top 10 countdown of most interesting things that happened in Taiwan in the whole year. My life was number 7. They actually had a camera crew follow me around because I spoke like a native Taiwanese. I dressed like a native Taiwanese. I used idiomatic expressions, that Taiwanese used. I really connected. I always say learning the culture comes before the language. And that's so
Wow, that is so
important.
powerful.
And so when I think about it, I went from learning my numbers 1 to 10 to being in the top 10. Right, in Taiwan. And so, from that point, after I came back to Canada, I was head teacher at a language school for 5 years. And, I'll get into one of your next questions, but it led me to thinking, what do my students really need and need to functionally survive in Toronto?
Yeah.
Right. And that's how I ended up starting on the spot language. So
That's so true. I mean, like, I will definitely share my own experience, but I think not only language, but so many things, right? Like, when I was learning communication, public relations, business, marketing, and if you do it the classroom way, you go to a class, you take a class, you learn all the theories, right? Especially if you're doing a PhD. Like, you learn all the theories, you learn all the concepts. It's really an accumulation of knowledge, but you don't have to. No, you are not being tested. Do you even know how to apply? But you are being tested. How much do you actually know? It has become a show off, I don't know, of knowledge as opposed to, wow, maybe I only learned master one theory, but I know how to apply it, right?
Exactly.
So I love this approach and this conversation really because before we went live, Anish and I, and like anyone, if you guys are homeschooling your children, or even if you don't homeschool your children, I think you can probably relate to my struggle. Because knowing what I know, when I look at my kids, how much they struggle doing the workbook, the worksheets, I can't even tell you how many times, like, throw that away, really trust the process, because especially my younger one, every day he loves playing. He has these elaborative like games that he has created. Sometimes I feel like I want to stop him. Stop that, come back in front of your workbook and do learning. And that is wrong, right? Because he's actually learning, he's applying. You just need to trust the like how you have learned Chinese without going through the drill of taking all the grammar classes, things like that, which is fascinating.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you mentioning about, your son and how making things applicable. And so, my daughter's huge into Minecraft. She loves Minecraft, and she's built buildings and buildings and underground railroads, and she knows all the different mining tools and different kinds of stone materials. So you know what we did? She got on her iPad, we did a screen recording, and now she's talking about, what she's building, and she's learning to be more expressive now.
That's right.
She's using vocabulary that she never used before.
100%.
And she's enjoying it.
That's right.
And she doesn't even, and doesn't the best learning happen when you don't realize it's happening?
That's right. Yeah. I can relate when we forget, time and space. You are having so much fun, and that's, you are learning. And but there's so much uneducated fear when it comes to technology, social media, like Minecraft. Do you get any backlash when you are allowing your daughter to be on YouTube, things like that?
Well, it's interesting. Like you said, there's the 80-20 rule, and how much time are you giving them online? Because for the eyes and everything else, they need some break from that as well. And trying to find a good balance with that. But as long as there's an intention with what they're doing, and they realize what they're doing, and what kind of learning they're also getting out of it, My daughter, when we talked about Minecraft and she made all these videos on her channel, just 2 weeks ago, we went up north in northern Ontario to a place called Thunder Bay. In Thunder Bay, there's a huge amethyst mine.
Wow.
And so in the newest version of Minecraft, it's an amethyst update, actually, in Minecraft.
Wow.
And now she got to go to a real life mine and actually pick and mine for amethyst. So she ended up getting a big bucket of amethyst, you know, and she was able to connect her online gaming to
That's amazing.
the real world. And while we were up there, you know, I'm not sure about in the States, but we learned a lot about, you know, the indigenous culture and, you know, indigenous peoples and different tribes and how, you know, this was a land for thousands and thousands of years and we need to respect and, you know, appreciate the land we're standing on. So when we went up to Thunder Bay, we actually did an indigenous retreat.
Wow.
And we met with indigenous elders who shared indigenous stories and taught us what does it mean to live off the grid, you know. And she did tobacco offerings, you know. She learned about smudging ceremonies. All of this real world education, right?
That's right.
That she learned about in textbooks.
That's right, yeah.
But it only became real when she went there and she interacted with an indigenous elder and learned about these things, right? In person.
That's right, yeah. It's such a critical element, right? And like I just think about the knowledge that the theories, the history lessons I have learned, because rarely did I have the chance to talk with someone when I was a student about any of the things I learned. Therefore, after an exam, I typically just like kind of forget everything, and which is really sad, right? So I want to go back to what you said earlier about language. Sure. I want to share my personal example. And I actually grew up in China. I came to the US in my early 20s, you know, talking about language acquisition. So I learned, and I never actually had any real conversations with English speakers. The only thing I learned was like I scored really high on all the exams, which is something that we're really good at. We know all the grammar and the, like vocabulary, everything. But a large number of my peers really struggle with the spoken language because we just don't know, and we just don't know how to apply everything we learned through a book to actually communicate what we need. Like even survival, right? Ordering hamburger.
Right.
It is very, very tough. So did you, with this new way of teaching, I'm curious, did you encounter any like challenges? I feel like for any disruptor, when you are trying to disrupt, like for me, I got bullied, all sorts of things happened to me. So when you were trying to disrupt and introduce this new way of learning language, did you encounter any like disruption, any like, you know, backlash, or people are like being bullied, or challenges? People are like, that is wrong. They question you, they challenge you, like, you know, anything like that? I'm curious.
Yes, and I'm going to get to that full answer. But prior to that, I think an important key thing is to realize that I didn't leave my job. I got fired. I got laid off.
Wow.
I was head teacher at a language school, and they said, sorry, we need to let you go. Do you know why? Because I didn't have a university degree. I had a 2-year multimedia design diploma, and I had a TESOL certificate, teaching English to students of other languages, but I didn't have a university. But I had 5+ years teaching experience. I was one of the head teachers at the language school, and yet I'm not qualified? Right? How does that make what? So suddenly I'm on the street. I don't have a job. What do I do?
Wow.
And one of the things, when I think about the challenges that I've had over this journey is, well, what challenges did my students have when they went to an ESL school? The moment they stepped outside of the classroom, they were deer in headlights. They froze. They couldn't use anything. And so I thought, well, you know what? How did I learn Mandarin when I was in Taiwan? I wonder, could I have the same approach with English learners studying in Toronto? So then I got an opportunity to, because I'm not a businessman like you, I'm an educator, right? What do I know about being a business person or an entrepreneur? And so my biggest initial challenge was just, how do you start a business? How do you run a business? But as I started going year by year, I realized one of my biggest challenges, number one with students, was unlearning. Like you grew up in China learning to study English to pass a test. Right? So one of my biggest challenges was taking all of these years of learning and the unlearning process is like, how do you take away, because every time students are trying to speak, what are they doing? They're thinking in grammar, right? They're not thinking, I want to speak perfectly, I don't want to make any mistakes, but your best teacher is your last mistake.
That's right.
You know, and learning to fall down and get up. And so that was one of my biggest challenges as an educator, was how do I get these students to develop new routines and learn in a different way, right? Thanks, Aditi. And so then as I started, running my program, and I've been able to adapt and modify my program based on my learners' feedback. Isn't that what any successful business person does? They listen to their clients.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And so over the years, I realized, you know what? Why am I the only person running an experiential, activity-based language program like this? Because every educator I spoke to says, yes, Anesh, this makes so much sense. We get it. But they didn't either have the means or the push, or, they didn't get laid off, or maybe they didn't have that kind of, thing to really push them to start something like this. And so one of my initial challenges was, building community. How do you find your tribe? Here I am 12 years later and I meet you, right? And then most recently, when I started the Disruptive Education Conference, I actually, on LinkedIn, I reached out to some key people, important influencers on LinkedIn who in the English education field. I said, what do you think about my program? I kind of put myself out there. And I got so much great response.
Oh, wow.
They're like, oh my God, this is amazing. What do you do? I've never heard of you. And I was like, oh my goodness. And suddenly more people got to learn about this on-the-spot language learning methodology that I have. And we started the conference and we brought in people from all over to join the conference. And then the pandemic hit, so we didn't have one in 2020. We might have a virtual one. And then, other educators reached out to me about the book. They're like, we really like what you're doing. Can you share your story in a chapter in a book called A New Paradigm of Education?
Wow.
And I was like, oh, wow. So one of my challenges initially was building that tribe, building that community. And I think a lot of these challenges that I faced were within, And you've done such a great job of reaching out and connecting and meeting so many people. And, that's inspiring to give people like myself, this opportunity to share our passion and our joy and what we love to do. And that means so much. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Oh my God, you gave me so much information. And I actually didn't know that you actually got fired. And I think that someone was talking about, like a reflection and HR. That's how sometimes I feel like when it comes to education, when I was a professor and because I was teaching social media, oftentimes I wanted to invite professionals from the industry to teach
Yeah.
something that I don't know. Every single time they got rejected because they don't have that piece of paper, even though they were being a journalist for 20
Right.
plus years, they were doing this and that in the field, but education, like whoever made that policy, they just don't care. And that is my biggest frustration, and that I just feel like I just cannot, because I can tell those people know so much more than I did when I was a teacher. I only know theories, but I can only help my students this much. The 20%, they need the 80% help, but I can't do that.
Right.
But they don't allow me to invite people who can actually deliver the content simply because of that piece of paper.
And I loved what you did recently when you brought on all those young adults and you got them to connect with older adults and get that conversation going. And you're really doing such an amazing job of really taking the traditional way of learning and making it accessible for young learners as well.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what you were talking about your daughter. Like I have been hosting my live streaming show, doing all sorts of video content for 4 years. And my communication skills, my listening, my public speaking, my real life skills have improved so much. And I see how young people like your daughter, my own children, my older son, he has excellent communication skills. I can see how them talking, using technology for free, the things that they have for free, and to use that as a tool for them to develop those essential life skills, as opposed to sitting in the classroom doing an exam about the key elements of a good public speech, right? Like,
I think our role as parents and educators is just showing them that anything is possible. They may not know about this application to do video editing. So my daughter can do video editing now, on her cell phone. She can edit her videos. She can do a podcast, with her cousins. And the way they present themselves, and they're doing their hair, and they're using body language to really emphasize their point. They're learning so many great skills.
That's amazing. And your daughter is only 9.
She's 9 years old, but she started several businesses. She's written several books and digitized them.
I love it.
The learning never ends, and it's so much fun.
I love it. Which reminds me, I feel last year I had the great honor to also interview another disruptor like you, Duncan Wardle. Those of you who haven't had a chance to watch that video, definitely I will link in the comment section. He used to be the former VP of innovation at Disney. So in that interview, he was talking about how people, as they grow older, they lose that skill to play. And so after he left Disney, and right now his full-time job is to educate older people, adults, how to play. Like, isn't that interesting? That is something that your daughter has. We all used to have when we were younger, but now through this educational system that we all lost it. Many people lost it. I lost it.
I appreciate you mentioning that, because that's actually another challenge, going back to your question, was how do we get students out of their mind to enjoy the process? We actually have joke telling built into our program, right?
Wow.
So if I asked you, how many English jokes do you know?
I don't even know any.
Right? And that's okay. That's okay. If you ask most Americans or Canadians or whatever, they probably know maybe 1 or 2 jokes. But how powerful!
I learned a few from my kids, actually. Yeah, but yeah.
But how powerful is knowing or learning or being able to tell a joke in another language?
Yeah.
Right? So we actually have our students go on the streets of Toronto and ask people. I'm international student studying English in Toronto, and part of my homework is to learn one simple joke in English. Would you be able to help me? And they're like, people are like, oh, sorry, I don't know. I'm not a joke person. I don't know. Then what do? Oh, you don't know any? So would you be able to look one up for me? Right? So even if they don't know, doesn't mean, okay, bye. No. You follow up. So someone's like, oh, okay, here you go. Why shouldn't you give Elsa a balloon? And this is, I don't know why. Because she'll let it go, right?
I
And
love
it's
that.
interesting. So imagine learning about 100 jokes on the streets from strangers. And even if our students only walk away learning 3 or 4 of those, that's probably more than enough for your lifetime.
That's
But
right.
imagine you're sitting in a conversation, having dinner or in a bar, and suddenly you can crack a joke. Hey guys, I have a joke for you. How powerful is that in connecting with other people and having fun, right?
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love it. So, like, kind of relevant to this, did you learn any jokes when you were learning Chinese language?
So I got one for you. 身份证, so ID, 身份证掉了怎么办?
Uh,
So what do you do if you lose your ID?
pick it up.
Yeah, 静起来, exactly. Ah, you know this one.
I didn't know. Why is that a joke?
Oh, so 掉了 can mean lose or drop.
Okay.
So what do you do if you lose your ID? Most people think lose. 身份证掉了怎么办?
I
Oh,
got it.
静起来. Right, but most people think, oh, what do you do if you lose your ID? Oh, go to the police office. No, you
That's right. Yeah.
pick it up, right? But even I told you, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah, because like diala can be like, I literally interpret diala as dropped on the floor, or it can be interpret I lost it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So it's a play on words.
Yeah.
But, not only can I tell jokes in Mandarin, but I can compliment people.
That's right.
So complimenting I is also built into our program. Students have to compliment at least 10 people every day. Now, what's the point of doing that? Human kindness. Isn't that what we want? Is to spread human kindness? When I was in Taiwan, I said, 我希望你的衣服看起来像你甩个人。那么好看, that looks really good, So we teach our students how to compliment people. And the amazing stories and friendships that have come from just being able to compliment someone, I've got hundreds of stories I could tell you. But it's built into our program, complimenting people. And
Wow.
I think that's important, spreading human kindness, right?
Wow, that's so important because, as the famous saying goes, people don't remember what you say, but they remember how you are making them feel. So I love how you are adding a human component to learning language, which makes learning so much more fun than the way that, reading a book, learning from people that you don't even know. Just like, this is just this brief conversation. Anish, you are disrupting how I think about language learning because our kids, they do learn Chinese. Like really push me to, push them to be outside this traditional learning environment, learn on the spot.
And there you go. You get it. Being put on the spot. Exactly, right? What does it mean to be put on the spot? Putting other people on the spot. You should put yourself on the spot at least once every day, right?
Yeah.
But going back to what you were saying about how different people learn, and I think that's why we take such a kinesthetic approach, and we work with each individual learner as a different person. So it's very tailored and customized. So in every one of our classes, it's a 1 language coach to 3 student ratio maximum. Because number one, if I'm a student, what do I want? I'm always thinking from my client's point of view as a student. What do I want? Then number 2, as a language coach, what do I want? And then as a business owner, I want to deliver the best quality of a program, so I want to deliver value. And so in 12 years, we have 100% return policy. If you don't feel you improved, you get all of your money back.
Wow, that's amazing. Like I do exactly the same thing. Yeah. It is really powerful. I'm curious, right? With this new innovative approach to learn a language compared to the old way, do you have any data to kind of compare and contrast? Like, traditional people learn language the traditional way versus this new way. What are some of the
The
compelling
metrics.
difference? Yeah.
Yeah, I get that answer the question all the time. Sorry. It's like, what do you have to show? I go, well, we don't have a leveling system. We don't have a score that you get, but we have, could you do this before? And can you do this now? So it's a skills-based assessment. You know, if there are three people having a conversation, can you jump into that conversation? Is that a skill? It's a tough one. But you couldn't do that before. Excuse me, guys, sorry to bother you, but quick question. Where would I find the nearest subway station? You know, maybe the first 20 times they can't do it. But with a language coach next to them modeling how to do it and them doing it, after 8 weeks, they say it takes roughly 8 weeks to develop a new routine to doing something, which is why our program's Monday to Friday for 2 hours every day.
That's right. Yeah.
But the idea that they can now apply and utilize that skill, it's really just, it's life transformational. Yeah, what was my train of thought? I kind of went off there a little bit.
No, I love it. So I was asking you about metrics. You were talking about
Oh, the metrics. Sorry. So after our program, our coaches say, could you do this? You couldn't do this. And they have little tick boxes. You could, you got 4 out of 5 of this. And then also, we have a self-assessment. They themselves say, okay, you know what? I couldn't do this before. Wait a minute, I can do this. I just did it successfully, great. And they have to just mark it on a piece of paper. We have something called a skills-based assessment, kind of a little booklet that they get. But by the end of the program, every student walks away with, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. So, you know what? My job is done. Do you know why? Because now they've become autonomous global citizens. They can now learn on their own. They don't need me anymore. Because they've learned how to best learn themselves.
Amen. Yeah. We were just talking about this last night with my own children, like learn how to learn. And you were talking about, our question, even this question I think is flawed, because how we are thinking about evaluating learning is always in terms of like metrics, right? I think that was another point that got so frustrated as a teacher, because there were so many soft skills or life skills, essential life skills, that they are improving. Students are improving, you are seeing, but you cannot quantify, or we haven't developed a system yet to allow us to quantify that. And but does that mean that those things are not important? So I think to really talking about this new paradigm of education, which I'm going to ask you later about the book, is like we need to disrupt the old way of evaluating our students, right?
Yeah, and that's something I actually spoke to Michael, who's I think possibly still on the show before, is there's so much resistance to change from the high level, right? The top level down, which is being run and done. We've been doing the same thing for many years. We're not going to change. And, it's frustrating. But so I know some people are trying to find a good hybrid of both, whereas I kind of went way on the opposite side of like, no, we're just focusing on, because I'm in language, we're focusing on communicative skills. We're not trying to pass a test or get into university, but, we have components like mindfulness built into our program. Our students, at the beginning of their day, just like my daughter does in the morning, she does her morning affirmations. I'm strong enough. I'm beautiful enough. Every day I'm getting better and better. Every day I can do the Rubik's Cube faster and faster. She has her affirmations that she does. But our students...
I'll show you. Sorry to interrupt you, but look at that. That's our vision board.
I love it.
Sticky notes. There is a corner for my kid, for each of my kids. They do exactly the same thing. Mindset is such a powerful section. They're like, my son, he's like 1,000 YouTube subscribers. I'm honest. I have self-control. It is so powerful. So sorry to
Right?
interrupt you.
No, and imagine they should be doing these things in their own language, let alone doing it in English. Right? How powerful is that? Right?
That's right.
And then being able to talk about what are you grateful for. So having an attitude of gratitude is built into our program. So every day our students have to journal. What are you grateful for? What was the best part of your day? What was the most challenging part of your day? And what can I do better tomorrow? They should be doing this in their own language, but now they're doing it in English. How powerful is that? Right? And this is what my program is. It has mindfulness, it has gratitude, it's experiential, it's real life, it's practical. And because there are multiple intelligences, each student is unique and different. And so we have a myriad of ways to ensure that the transfer of learning happens. So we use Quizlet, for visual learners. We have flashcards that they can associate sentences with images. We build conversation mind maps where they can connect different, so they can have actually 4 hours of conversation just by reaching into their conversation mind map. They can control and lead a conversation, And so we have audio, we have videos, we do storytelling is built into our program. We have passion videos where students have to share their learning improvement over the last 8 weeks. So all of these different components really cater to all the different students. So it's customized, it's tailored, and everybody finds their own way of enjoying part of our program. No, I don't like this. I don't like complimenting Anesh, or I don't like asking for directions, but I like learning about hot topics in the city. Like, how do you feel about the election coming up? Each student is unique because it's based on their interests, their hobbies, right? So it's very tailored. It's a very tailored approach.
Yeah, I really love it. My son is watching us live right now. He has been like commenting like crazy to make sure that I actually get his attention. I got it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So great comment from Esther saying that, feeling really inspired. I feel the same way, just learning. And do you think, I'm going to put you on the spot, Anish. So do you think this type of learning can be applied to different disciplines? What do you think?
Well,
only for language learning?
I think that what we are language for me is just a tool, right? So yes, we're applying this methodology for language, but the idea of, routine is the mother of skill. If you want to build a new skill, you develop a routine. So all the things that we're doing, mindfulness, gratitude, activity-based learning, and, I think lots of teachers can also take this kind of approach in their own classrooms. But one of my goals, I feel my kind of program is like a missing piece that needs to be added to a school. As experiential as you can make a classroom with acting and role playing, nothing beats the real life.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? And this is what you're doing with your learners online.
Yeah, exactly. So, oh my God, I just feel like you're just finishing my sentences. I don't even need to talk. Yeah. That's how aligned we are. Just what I do is like enrichment supplemental to the traditional learning. Like I feel like in the argument I said earlier is that school learning is only 20%, right? And 80% is what you're doing, what I'm doing. So it is so fascinating to just hear your story. Even though I'm teaching a different field, I see lots of similarities, common ground between what we're doing, like fascinating. And I feel like learning this way, students can actually retain the knowledge better.
100%. I have students 10 years later saying they remember certain sentences, because it's all connected, because they're lived experiences, right, that they had. And, they remember, we remember through taste and smell and locations. And so students remember, I remember standing in front of the statue of Sir John A. Macdonald, who was Canada's first prime minister, who built the railway across Canada. But someone asked them, how do you feel about Sir John A. Macdonald, someone said, "Oh, that bloody beep beep beep, bastard, blah blah blah. He killed millions of Chinese people who built the railway across." So they got a whole different perspective of that person who people revere and love, and oh, Sir John A. But 10 years later, they'll never forget that millions of Chinese people were killed building this railway across Canada.
That's right.
And that's why we have small Chinatowns throughout the country,
That's right.
because some of them settled there. And they were also charged a head tax when they came to Canada.
That's right.
Right? But that's the one thing, if the student still remembers that 10 years later.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Like I can't tell you, Anish, how many times, like I interviewed actually quite a few students on this show, and so many of them told me that when they are preparing for an exam, they will only need to study like 3 weeks or 2 or 3 prior to the exam, and as soon as the exam is over, they return everything to the teacher, and I feel like that's what happened to me. As a Chinese, I spent 20 years, or maybe like that's an exaggeration, at least 10 years learning advanced math. My math was pretty good. So when I came to University of Maryland to do my graduate school, and I went to education department, and they were learning at graduate school, they were learning math that I learned when I was like 5th grade, right? But the point is that does not matter, with all the tears and stress, I pushed myself so hard to learn the math. It didn't serve me at all. Like, I don't think I benefit maybe a little bit, but definitely I don't need to spend so much time, so much stress to try to master that. Like, just I would rather half of that time and learn something else. And so totally, yeah.
And it's interesting because when students come to Toronto, they're spending 6 hours in a classroom, sitting down, learning all day. But actually, the human brain can only really take maybe an hour at most, or maybe 2 hours of actual retention and learning. I'm like, you know what? We're going to learn a couple sentences, and now let's go practice with 100 people, Where would I find the nearest, TD bank, or, let's just go and practice. But then, when you practice in a classroom or with the teacher, you understand the teacher. But when they go out on the street and talk to a stranger, somebody said, "Oh yeah, just head straight and hang a left." Anesh, what do you mean by head straight? Head? Oh, head means go. They go, "Oh, what do you mean hang a left?" Oh, hang means turn. And they're like, "Oh." And then they talk to another person. "Where would I find the nearest TD bank?" "Oh, just head straight and make a left." But Anish, how do you make a left? Why not turn? But then if they ask the same question to 100 different people, how many people will say hang or make? Many. So now their listening is improving.
That's 100%.
Right? And students are, "I want to speak like a native English speaker. I want to sound like an American or Canadian." I go, no. That's not important. Intelligibility is more important than how you sound.
Yeah.
Because when you talk to a Canadian or someone on the streets of Canada, you're going to hear all the different accents of the world. So actually, you're training your ear to become a better listener of all the different accents.
100%.
Which is much better than just being able to watch another native English speaker teaching online and teaching English videos. No.
100%. Yeah, my ears have definitely become a lot more sensitive. Yeah, like I can. Yeah, 100%. I love it. Yeah, and so here this great comment from Michael. We were talking about can this approach be applied?
Yes.
So 100%. I think to make that happen, we need to buy in from school leaders, from communities, from local organizations to allow maybe have a co-op lab, right? Allow students to go there to practice this type of experiential learning. Yeah, I love
exactly what Michael was saying. Just before we get onto that one, we'll go back to that. But my daughter learned about the cycle of butterflies in school. But then when we went up to Thunder Bay, she actually could see how the cocoon was made. They could see actually the 4 different stages. And that butterfly, we actually got to release butterflies as well. That's science.
Amen. I actually want to So this book, I have this here. I don't know if you have a chance to read this. It's called Boys Adrift. I actually
Nice.
interviewed the author, Dr. Leonard Sachs, and he is a best-selling author. And in this book, he talks about how there are actually gender differences in terms of learning. So I love what you're talking
Yes.
about. For your daughter, she can see it, touch it. This is even more important for boys to learn. For boys to really master something, they are more so sensory learners compared to girls. So for them to force them to sit in the classroom, learn the way that their female students are learned, it is really torturing to the boys. So this entire book, and I have other books just talking about how globally schools have become so unfriendly to our boys. That's another reason I wanted to homeschool our kids, knowing what I know now. Like, I only have boys. Yeah.
It makes so much sense because you're working with each child in their respective differences and how they best learn. And so when you're
Exactly.
teaching them in that way, they're like sponges. They're grabbing everything because you're teaching them, even though they're from the same mother and father.
100%,
They're very
100%. Yeah.
different.
Yeah, yeah. I remember another point I learned in this book, Boys Adrift. I have so many books talking about gender differences. Like this one is like the boy crisis. For those of you, like everyone join us live or watch the replay, if you have
Wow.
boys, definitely check out this book, Boys Adrift, Boys Crisis. And then another difference is that I learned that for boys, their listening and visual system are not as developed as girls. So, but typically in the classroom, boys they tend to sit in the back of the classroom. So ideally, because they are not fully developed yet, they should be sitting at the front row so they can absorb information better. But that is not how traditional classes are run. Boys are typically in the back. So just like physiologically, they just cannot listen or see that well. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
very interesting. So here's another good comment from Aditi. She's talking about studied Arabic for 10 years and never learned to speak a word, right? Goes to show how traditional Arabic learning. I think we can fill in the blank. English learning, Chinese learning, French language learning. I think
Any
that is
language,
how
yeah.
people pursue learning in general. Go
Yeah.
to a classroom, do exam, and yeah. And
And I
that's another
appreciate
good.
Aditi mentioning that. And this is actually, when you get to a point in your life, you're thinking about purpose, meaning, and what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind for your kids, and what are you doing, right? And so I've been teaching a lot of international students from all over the world, and being part of this community that I'm in, and have been developing. A few people have said, the people who need your program the most, Anish? I said, well, who? They're like the newcomers, the refugees, the people who are settling in Canada, because they're here to stay. But language is still the biggest barrier they're facing in settlement. So over the pandemic, I actually created a language settlement program for
Wow.
newcomers, victims of torture, refugees. Because the standard way of learning a language as an immigrant when you come here is all classroom-based learning. This is a pen. Okay, everybody repeat. This. What? They don't need this. What do they really need? They need to be able to have conversations with the parent-teacher interview. Go to the doctor. You know what? I'm feeling soreness here. Or my daughter has a sore throat. Being able to express in what aisle would I find halal food? What these sentences that are real life that they need, not just to survive, but thrive in a new country. And so my goal, is with my program is let me cater it with a language settlement program to help every immigrant who comes into a new country. They need this kind of experiential
Wow.
language program.
Wow.
And because my parents came here from South Africa in 1978, and they were immigrants. And we went to Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, a small rural town, and they had language, but culture was a big barrier. And so I want to really help people who are not to settle here really learn the language as well.
Yeah, I love how you said this earlier. to learn a language, you have to learn the culture first. And I'm just thinking about, I have so many friends and their children, they learned Japanese, they learned Korean because they're interested in animation, they're
Right?
interested in Korean drama, and because they
Yeah.
have that internal, Daniel Pink talks about this, they have that internal purpose, they have that drive so that they can figure out. But it's not like they sit in the class or they took a like language class that makes them want to learn more. Very fascinating. So to respect your time and everyone's time, I'm just going to wrap this up because I know I could just chat with you forever. So I do want to learn a little bit more about this book that you were talking about. So a new paradigm of education. So what is this new paradigm about, and where can people get a copy of the book? So share something with us.
So, I mean, this is my first time co-authoring a book and being part of anything like this. That's kind of a big deal for me, and I'm very grateful for a colleague, Monique, for inviting me to share my journey, my story of what I feel a new paradigm of education. So it's 8 authors who each have a chapter in this book, and we each have our own individual way of how we're disrupting or what we feel our new paradigm is. And we're all in here sharing our stories and what we are doing. So some people are, I'm not going to give away the whole book, but some people have a more, psychological approach of what the new paradigm is and working with the individual through the mind, and someone, how to connect, spiritually, and bringing spirituality into education and homeschooling like you're doing. There are so many ways of different learnings, and so there are kind of really 8 stories of, you know, sharing, and it's about building community and bringing other people, and not just our stories, but what are you doing, and what are other people doing. Let's share this together. So the book is going to be coming out in October. We're just finalizing the book cover now. There's no link for it yet. It's just going through the editor. There's a whole process that I didn't realize. But I will share it with you once we have all the cover and the link to buy it, all of that. I don't have it with me yet, but I will share it, and hopefully when this is posted, we'll put a link to it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I can always add a new link. Yeah, that is fascinating. Fascinating. Yeah, I can't wait to anything that has education in it, disruption in it. I can't wait to check it out. So I understand. Actually, my friend and I, we just wrote a book earlier this year, and so I know the entire process can take quite some time.
Awesome.
So yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and I hope that one day I could share a stage with you and we can talk about this,
Oh, that'd be
in
amazing.
other countries. Like I wanna change how language is learned when living or studying abroad.
Yeah,
How can we
yeah.
present at colleges and universities in other countries to take this more real life experiential
That's
approach?
amazing. I mean, even though you and I were talking about different disciplines, we share a very similar approach. I really think this approach that you and I are talking about can be applied, as Michael shared earlier, to so many different disciplines. And
Absolutely.
like this is so people ask me what I do, and I try to think of myself as a movement, right? So
Right.
like I think what you and I are doing is it's not just something we do. This is a movement that we're starting and being a part of, right? Like disrupting an old way of learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
we're
So
stronger as a tribe and a community of supporting each other. And so I appreciate
100%.
you supporting me with this. And thank you for
Yeah.
sharing some of your journey today with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I have. Anyway, you know how amazing Anesh is, so definitely connect with him on LinkedIn. I have his LinkedIn link on the screen, and I want you to maybe share some final either advice, or maybe I want to ask this question. So reflecting, you have a very successful journey, right? Like I saw some of the awards that the school and has received, and just yourself, such an incredible human being. So if you can reflect on your journey, on your success, so what do you think are some hard skills and some soft skills that you have developed along the way that help you get to where you are today?
Great question. I would say hard and soft skills are obviously both very important. And I would say being open to change and being curious, constantly learning from others, and being able to listen to what other people are saying, what their needs and wants are. I think any successful business owner listens to their clients. And I can think every year I've changed my program just a little bit. And I try new things, so constantly innovating new. So podcasting is built into my language learning program now as well.
I saw it.
Through our On the Spotter podcast. But by the end of it, students are grabbing my microphone. I want to talk. I want to talk. But in the beginning, like, oh, podcast what? Podcast what? But so being open to trying new things, innovating, being curious, and I'm not a nat. I was a tennis coach before. I was a tennis professional for 2 years. So, I was also a multimedia specialist, and so taking some of these hard skills that I've learned. I love being outside. I love coaching. I love computers. I love technology. I love using it as a tool. I can edit my own videos. I can work with audio, video, graphic design. So maybe I was naturally born to be an entrepreneur. No, I don't think so. But I've been able to take all of my past experiences and different skills that I have to say, you know what? Maybe I can use these skills in my current job to find passion and purpose and meaning in what I'm doing today. So constantly learning, using the skills that you may not even realize you had. Like, wait a minute, if I have a math background, okay, how can I use that? As far as structure and understanding formulas, language also, there's a formula. There are certain things that you can apply to different ways of learning. So, yeah, hard skills, soft skills, I think they both have equal value, and what we do in our program is try and find a mesh of both. What would you say, being a language learner yourself, is the most important hard or soft skill for an English learner?
I mean, I think to really kind of summarize today's conversation, I'm just thinking about this quote from Albert Einstein. I think he said something similar to this: the only source of knowledge is experience. The only source of knowledge is experience, right? So like what I learned the most is through real life. That is what On the Spot language is about. And my program is like a big emphasis on project-based learning, and how I really learn English, especially how to use the knowledge I have learned, is by coming to the United States, actually having conversation, hosting my live streaming show, doing my degree, speaking class, speaking on stage, and all those things. Experiential learning has really helped me master language, not the exams I took. Yeah,
Right.
maybe like the grammar part, but definitely not the real life practical part. So yeah, so the only source of knowledge is experience. I really love that quote from.
And I think if I were to give a message to parents and other educators, I would say, provide your kids with the support and encouragement and that they need, and tailor the learning and customize it for each child. And in terms of language, if you can travel safely, do it. If you can have a pen pal, do it. If you can have a culture exchange, get your student, because sometimes you can stay inside a bubble. Expand your children's horizons and open up new opportunities for them, and let them just fly. Because once you show them the means, they can do the how and answer the why and do a lot of it on their own. But yeah, rather than just walk the walk and talk the talk, you've got to walk the walk, not just do the talk. So
I love it. I love it. Yeah, definitely check out the replay. Like Anish dropped so much value, and we had such an amazing conversation. I prepared a list of questions, but the conversation just flowed so nicely. I didn't even look at my questions, and I love it. I love it. So
Awesome.
definitely check out the replay, and and keep us posted regarding this new book coming out next month. So I will update the link so everyone can check a copy. So thank you so much again, Anish, and thank you so much everyone joining us live from LinkedIn, from Facebook, from Amazon, from YouTube, from all over the place. I really appreciate you guys. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, I want to invite you to join me live again next Friday or Saturday for some of you. Same time, same location I have a young man coming to my show next week talking about his journey from a college dropout to become a $1 million business owner. Incredible story, learning outside the classroom through real life in the e-commerce space. So I'm really excited for that conversation next week. So thank you so much again, Anish, and thank you so much again, everyone. See you.
Bye.